Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Frozen Stiff event, in which the Frozen Shieldbreaker is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as the troop, it has a blue-brown arcane. The troop itself has a very similar mechanic to the one of last week, though is substantially weaker than the one we had last week. It ends up creating a blue mana potion whenever it ends up taking skull damage, so instead of a brown one like the one we had the other week, it is now a blue one. Unfortunately, every other aspect about him is basically worse, other than the fact that it does have immune to stun and a few others, because it is a dwarf, and most dwarves, if not all dwarfs, have the fortitude, kind of like how most undead have undying, though oddly enough, this undead does not have undying, but it does have fortitude, which is better, probably because there's some overlap in the immunity, so they didn't want to give it both. But anyways, it curses freezes enemies and then deals damage boosted by blue gems at such a low ratio that it probably won't even be used in Guild War. And outside of Guild War, it's also pretty much not going to be used unless you really want to end up messing around with his final trait. Kind of reminds me of Skady a little bit, where I'm not sure why they keep jipping blue. Not only does the blue hero class have +3, not have half mana start like the other +3 mana accumulating hero class, but we also have this Skady just being awful with its blue storm. Which makes not viable generally to use the Perpetual Storm. And now we have this gem, which on the brown version actually was a pretty decent troop, like a really good early game skull spammer. And then this thing, which is basically nothing. And we just get the blue gem from that. I'm not sure why blue keeps getting the short ends, but unfortunately it's making blue a little bit weaker in the game. That's why other colors builds are generally used. Yeah, blues is a little bit unfortunate. Nothing else, some Zugoff blue teams and a few others are still pretty prevalent. But yeah, the troop is just so much worse than the one we had the other week. I'd probably skip on it in most situations, unless you just really want to mess around with the new blue potion mechanic. Anyways, aside from that, as far as the event key drop table, of course, it is associated to Drak Zoom, one of the more recent kingdoms added to the game. It was the second to last kingdom ever added, with the last one, of course, being Sin of Mirage. So this place does have a pretty low amount of troops. I believe it just reached 15 stars today, so very, very, very low amount as far as total. As far as the event key drop table, every single thing that you see underneath the tab here, when you do go to Drak Zoom, is available with the 5 exceptions of the 4 Illithia troops, which are, of course, the faction troops, and the Doom of Stone, which is, of course, associated to Brown Dooms whenever they roll around. As far as actually opening event keys, probably worth skipping overall. The only thing maybe worth going for is the Legend of King Bloodhammer, which is so situational that you generally don't use it much in the current state of the game. There's other things that can do a single convert, like Glaceon, not Glaceon, well, Glaceon here, oh duh, that's the other one that you'd probably want to go for. Glaceon actually resides here. Yeah, those two Doomskull converting things are the main things. Actually, Glaceon probably be a bit more so. Has 65% reduction. Also, I believe the first one to get that reduction, though there are other things that are cheaper and more expensive that have it. But it has a double convert with Doomskull. It's one of only 2 troops that has it, with the other one being Hatter and Scroll, oddly enough. But overall, it's probably only worth it if you want to get those Doomskull options. You can try for Obsidious. Obsidious is a really, really good utility troop. The only problem with, it's mostly used for its 4x stun, and pretty much entirely for its 4x stun. The only problem with trying for it is the other mythic is Fallen Valdis, which is one of the top 5 worst mythics in the entire game. So if you want to take that risk, you can get either Obsidious or one of the absolute worst that you're never going to use for anything other than Kingdom Upgrade. So overall, maybe get the Skull Spammers if you want, but I really would not advise going for the Mythic unless you just really have a lot of event keys, and this is one of the last few that you're missing. Just because if you want Obsidious, it's probably better just to target it off when it rolls around into Soulforge. Trying to get it by this means and then getting a Fallen Valdis is going to hurt very hard, so probably worth skipping in that regard as far as the Mythic is concerned. So, as far as the world event, it is the most confusing thing I have ever seen. I am pretty sure every single person in my guild has a completely different score if I look at it, because the way that the scoring system works is so ridiculously absurd this week. So, the easiest way to explain this is there are 3 brackets of fights. In the first bracket, you're going to want to take the shield, or the Frozen Shieldbreaker, instead of the Ice Golem. In the second bracket, you want to focus more on the Octurion than the Hive Mind. And then all the way in the final bracket, you want to ideally take every single Glaceon you see, and Fallen Validus being the second most prevalent. So basically, once it reaches the final section, the order of priority is Glaceon is the highest. Also keep in mind, this is not rarity ordered, this is just completely all over the place. So, Glaceon is the most important. Fallen Validus is second. Octurion is third. Hivemind is fourth. Frozen Shieldbreaker is fifth, and if you want to really simplify it, just don't take Ice Golem if you can avoid it. If you just don't take Ice Golem, you're probably, for the most part, doing the correct room. So that's all the points. It's all over the place, and yeah, just don't take Ice Golem, and you'll probably be fine if you want it ultra simplified. So yeah, that. It is just absolutely insane because all those are completely different rarities. Like the Fallen Validus is the mythic, yet it's underneath, it's one lower than the legends. The some of the ultra rare is like higher than the epics, and it's just weird. I have no clue what is up with this world event. Probably the most confusing one we've ever had as far as like the point distribution and just everything with it. But if you just don't take Ice Golem, you're probably for the most part doing the correct order if you just want to ultra simplify how to do the current world event. Anyways, as far as weekly things that we got going on this week, we have Illithia faction tomorrow, which honestly I feel like is one of the easier factions in the game. It has a lot of magic reduction, and if you magic reduce the enemy before they magic reduce you, you kind of just auto win, which is kind of convenient. Wednesday, we're going to be getting the International Dog Day pet. I wasn't around for when we had the International Cat Day one. Of course, we had the 2021 come back last Saturday, and the other one came out that one Wednesday while I was gone. What was that, 2 Wednesdays ago at this point? But we're getting the International Dog Day one this Wednesday. So we'll probably get the weekend one at some point, though I don't believe it's this weekend. But this Wednesday, we are getting the new 2021 one. So that's one that everyone doesn't have. On Thursday, we have ourselves the Slayer class event, which over the course of the last year has become surprisingly meta for quite a few things. I still feel like quite a few of the other triple damage burnings are a little bit more viable. However, there are some really niche teams, particularly with Zugoff, where it ends up working out really well due to the ability to constantly keep enraging. It also ends up coming in with Ironhawk, because a single Ironhawk team can actually end up utilizing it to be in place of an Ironhawk. It doesn't work for Gnomapalooza, but it does work for farming gnomes themselves, so it has that going for it. And on Friday, we have our self-invasion. So we just had raids, we're going straight into invasions. I don't think they were always right back to each other week to week, were they? But they are now, so raids, then straight into invasions, which is the order they came out in as well. Aside from that, as far as troops in Soulforge, there are a numerous amount that are actually viable. One pretty funny thing is Glaceon's actually available both in Event Key drop table and in here. I wouldn't really advise trying to get it in here, though. As far as mythics I would advise getting, though, there are, I would say probably 2 of them. I don't know, maybe 3. Depends how you look at it. But anyways, the highest priority is obviously High King Irongut. High King Irongut, still one of the most relevant mythics in the entire game. And if you're looking for a good underworld mythic, is the most useful mythic to end up getting your hands on. The main gimmick with him is that he has Devour chance based on whatever his attack value is, which means, yes, if he has over 100 attack or higher, he does have a 100% chance to Devour, assuming they do not have immune to Devour, in which case they will have a 100% chance of not being devoured, in which case you would have to curse them, or if it's just a trait of it, you could just end up stunning it, though generally curse is the easier way to go, since it's almost nothing is immune to it, so a little bit more consistent in that regard. But overall, obviously pretty good, has all Mac extra turn, you can just keep devouring, you just can mana loop it, and it gets a free one-shot every single time while gaining stats. Of course, it's upscales as well, because whenever you're going up against a harder enemy, not only does it still devour them, just like anything else, but you also get to gain all their stats, so you get to keep up with their stats after a single devour. So overall, absolutely insane troop, really amazing, mostly just used for underworld. It can be used situationally otherwise, but if you're just looking for a great underworld option and you don't currently have one, High King Irongut will basically decimate every single blue, brown, and yellow dungeon, and there's also quite a few of them that can pure color build, particularly blue, where you can just build a whole team and not even need like access to any other color to still build a effective team. Aside from that, there are 2 other ones that are somewhat okay, though I probably would skip on, but they're not horrible. The Scourge of Honor and Queen Aurora. Queen Aurora, it's a very situational troop. It's +1 to every single color. It's basically like a +6 link. Its ability I still feel like is a bit underwhelming, but it does have a 10 gem spawn. Main reason I'm mentioning this is the first time it's been available since Hatter and Scroll was in the not Soulforge, but in the season pass from last season. And this is actually really good synergy with Hatter and Scroll. So if you're looking to build a Hatter and Scroll build, Queen Aurora is probably that one thing you're missing to really put the team together. So maybe worth considering in that regard, because it has good beast synergy. Whenever beasts become more meta, Queen Aurora can actually end up becoming more meta as well, because it's one of the few instances where it can actually not be horrible. It's normally not used in Divine teams that are better being better mana accumulating and support options underneath Divines. However, beasts don't really have as many options other than the 50% mana start beast you're already going to be using initially. So Queen Aurora normally fills that gap, and whenever beasts become more meta, so will Queen Aurora, and technically beasts became a little bit more meta when Hatter and Scroll were introduced, so there's that. So maybe worth considering. And aside from that, the Scourge of Honor. Scourge of Honor is kind of like Phoenicia, but worse in a sense. It ends up dealing true damage to all enemies and then gains its mana back for every single curse and disease enemy. The one area where this is really relevant is if you need to exactly double cast the enemy, Scourge of Honor is technically quicker than Phoenicia if you can specifically kill them in 2 AoE true damage casts. The reason for this is, of course, not only does he have a slightly lower mana cost, but he also ends up having the mana back that he ends up getting based on how many disease and curse are on the opposing team. And because he has the ability to both disease and curse on himself, if you got a lot of extra turns initially, you kind of already will have that mechanic. You also have that little bit of explode at the beginning of the board, so you can sometimes get a little bit of value there. And overall, a pretty decent alternative. Obviously, Phoenicia is still the true way to go. However, Scourge of Honor does at least come into play ever so occasionally. Personally, I don't feel like I've used it much in the last, well, since it was released. But it does have a really specific purpose that can be useful. And I'm pretty sure at least some amount of people do use it for that purpose. It's just very situational when you would need to exactly double cast. And by that point, it's normally just more convenient to just use the Phoenicia team, even if the Phoenicia needs to double cast anyways. Aside from that, one other thing to mention, which I was going to mention when we get to the troops, which we might mention then too, but Hatter Ascendant. So, of course, this thing required the moon. It is now possible to get the moon in the Volkey drop table. So, this is now a thing. You can end up getting Hatter Ascendant now, essentially, if you're playing free-to-play as well as the moon, which, of course, the main thing blocking you is the moon, generally. As far as this is one of the cheapest boss troops in the entire game, only being outdone by the Scroll Reborn, which is even cheaper, and slightly easier because the sun has been out for a couple months now, whereas the moon was just introduced to your drop table. Do keep in mind, you could open hundreds of vault keys and still not get the moon. It is a very rare drop, and there are other tarot cards competing with it. I think like, what, 4 or 5 or so of them at this point. So the chance that you specifically get the moon from a vault key is exceedingly unlikely. If you're currently low on them, you could go farm the next vault event, which is in about a month from now. I believe it's September 26th, I want to say. Somewhere around there, 20-something. But it's about 1 month from today. So if you're still low on vault keys, you can just kind of wait till then and just farm them up. But otherwise, yes, it is possible to get the moon now if you went and saved several hundred of them. Worth attempting, possibly. Overall, it's nothing too special. Of the 3 of them, this is honestly the weakest one, the Hatter Ascendant, which is kind of funny because arguably it's almost the hardest to obtain of the 3. But this thing ends up creating 6 green gems, and then converts all green gems to Lycanthropy gems, and then summons 1, 2, 3 Winter Wolves as Impervious, which isn't horrible, and the other thing is horrible, but overall, it's just not that too good. If you're going to be using a troop like this, you're normally using Scroll Reborn or Hatter Ascendant. The main reason why you might want to end up getting this is similar to Leona's Tower and the other ones, is that it's a little bit cheaper than a normal mythic, and it counts towards the kingdom upgrades. So as far as getting Grim Woods upgraded, it counts as pretty much 1 whole star, assuming that troops are the main thing holding you back. So there's that going for it, and yeah, that's pretty much the main reason you'd get it. Completionist sake, and that for that sake. So it's useful to some degree if you really, really want to mess around with a Lycanthropy build still in the current state of game, but overall, Hatter and Scroll tend to do it better in most compositions. As far as the weapons, there's one particularly noteworthy weapon that you probably want to get. I don't feel like I use it as much compared to the other Doom weapons. Of the 6, I do feel like this is on the lesser half. However, it is still not bad. Ends up dealing, well, it's the blue Doom weapon that's good. The full AoE ones. It deals damage to all enemies based on how much you have it upgraded, getting additional damage, and then it transforms all red to Doom Skulls. Very situational compared to the other 5. Honestly, in the current state of the game, I feel like I use this the least of all 6. However, that doesn't make it any less viable, just because it is used a bit less. It is still a really, really good option for how much damage it ends up doing. Obviously, a really hard counter to reds that you could utilize for Guild Wars, which I forget if I mentioned while we're on that page. However, Guild Wars is available this week. Don't forget to go set all of your defend teams and all of that. because we do have Guild Wars going on. Of course, we'll be doing that on every nightly stream, with tonight specifically being on the tasks. And since I'm talking about this, I might as well mention it real quick as well. We will be messing around with Celestial Flask tonight, which at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we do every single night. But this weapon is kind of like a rope dart. It's pretty insane. It is money locked, unfortunately, for several months. It will be available again whenever the next Bright Forest event, after the next Bright Forest event occurs. So the Bright Forest event that happens at the end of the season will not have it, but every Bright Forest event that happens after that will have it. So do be mindful of that. The one in 7 weeks will specifically not have this available. However, it does create 3 of basically any potion except brown. I have no clue why it excludes only brown. You'd almost think it would exclude its own color, but good thing it doesn't, because this makes it a lot more consistent. That will end up creating red or blue, and you can go just absolutely crazy. You end up getting 3 potions. The chance one of them is red or blue is pretty high. If you have something else that has an extra turn board control, like an explosion off of like Goblin Rocket or something similar, that's pretty cheap. Not only does it have color overlap, so if it is a red, you just get such insane value, but you'll also be able to cover your entire team with all the colors and just get value that way. So overall, this thing should be pretty meta. I would say top 20 weapon. I don't think it's going to be top 10, but I don't know. We're going to have to mess around with it, see exactly what it can do, see how effective it is. Obviously, the main thing that makes it viable is more so the gain an extra turn. Any weapon that ever gets this tends to be pretty good. I think the only one that kind of isn't is Daphnia, just because the damage output that it does with no follow-up is kind of underwhelming compared to most other weapons, so normally not used for that. But pretty much every other hero weapon that has extra turn is utilized, and this Celestial Flask is no different. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that ends up panning out once we end up getting it. Aside from that, is that all the things? I believe that is all the things. So let's go over the troops. So as far as the world events, there are, it's a little bit of a weird one. We do have access to skulls and extra magic damage, so you can go either or for that route. However, it is a bit of a weird restriction, brown, red, dwarf, so it doesn't open up too many options. As far as the more expensive team, we're running with a doomed crossbow here. Just to go for the convert onto blue. It's actually the inverse of that other weapon, though much more useful than the other weapon. But it's basically just the inverse of the other one that we just had in Soulforge right now. Stonehammer, one thing that you can do with this as well is with Sun Spear or any triple damage burning hero class, you can end up getting burn synergy for triple damage, so you will truly be one-shotting everything if you weren't already. So there's that for the later stages. Excavator, this is pretty good for just feeding up your browns since it has Perpetual Brownstorm, assuming you can get a kill within the first 4 turns. This is even more so if you're using a hero class that has the Brownstorm at start of battle, like Titan or something similar. However, it's better to go for the higher damage, at least at some point. If you're dying too much, it could help to do otherwise. However, it does have an entangle and that stuff like that, so it should generally survive long enough to kind of start destroying everything. And theoretically, you could do Slayer hero class too, but using that Perpetual Red ends up helping out quite a bit. But you can still alternate with the Brown Storm and still be good to go. And of course, this is relevant for that you can alternate between Brown and Red Storm, because this creates red gems boosted by brown gems on the board. So having both storms as access is pretty decent. And in King High Forge is mostly just used for his 50% mana start, though due to the extra magic, you will be able to clean up off of Doomed Crossbow as well. If they aren't dying, you can end up doing that and basically skull kill the first 2 and cast kill the final 2, which is generally how most of the battles are going to go with this team. As far as the lower team, I'm probably actually going to be using this one just because I kind of prefer the Empower and the lower mana cost here, especially since you're going to have enchant if you buy pretty much any amount of packs, so having that is going to end up making things a little bit smoother. So in this, we just have Gimlet feeding Brown immediately into Doomed Club. Do keep in mind, of this team, there is one thing that's expensive on it, which how I currently have it set up, which is Doomed Club. However, you can use any brown weapon in the entire game, even Black Manacles or something similar, so you don't have to be using Doomed Club. I'm just showing this because this is the most viable thing that you can put there, though any brown or red weapon, ideally brown if you're using Gimlet, but or if you're using this variant of it, but any brown weapon that you have that's decent, you could probably put there, and you're gonna be fine. But Doomed Club, too many different names for them. But Doomed Club is the best way to go if you happen to have access to it. Otherwise, Black Manacor or something similar, perfectly fine. Also, Withering Staff, pretty good option because it creates skulls as well, plus having cast damage, so if you happen to have that laying around. But anyways, Gimlet's mostly just here for the Empower defeat into Brown. He is an epic, so a little bit higher rarity. The Deep Borers are rare, so you should have this laying around. Good to have it traded at least to second trait, so you get the extra blue mana, and you basically just do this all the way to the right or all the way to the left in order to make the board a little bit smaller and spawn a bunch of browns. And finally, we have Excavator. This is the same one as before. It's mostly used for the pseudo infinite Brownstorm, which you can do with the Titan hero class, which starts with Brownstorm, so you get that synergy, and then you just end up creating red based on the browns that you destroyed, which helps get your Gimlet and Deep Borer back up so you can keep mana accumulating and be good to go. So this was just a reminder, but the moon is available in the drop table, as well as Hatter Ascendant, specifically the one that costs 8 blue orbs, major blue orbs also being available. However, that is way cheaper than 8 power, so overall pretty nice. As far as the faction event, we have Illithia. It is a purple blue. Oh, gosh, I actually forgot. Yeah, it's purple blue restriction. So as far as Illithia, you can end up running the pretty standard Rowain team, pretty meta. You can end up running this for so many different things within the game. It's just a really solid team. If you haven't built this team or tried this team yet, definitely make sure to do so. It's honestly probably the main team to target when you're first starting the game, because there is almost nothing this team cannot do. Obviously, it cannot be used in every faction, but the amount of instances where you can get away with using this team is so absurdly high, and there's almost no piece of content that it can't end up doing, and everything here is obtained pretty much by a guaranteed rate. Oddly enough, Leprechaun, despite being the lowest rarity on this team, is sometimes the hardest thing to obtain on it, because everything else is a guaranteed way of getting it. The Urskia shield is from 250 wins on the Sentinel hero class, which is the Urskia hero class, obviously. Rowain you get for free just for completing a Forest of Thorns, and is one of the better damage sources you have access to earlier on in the game, if not the absolute best, especially with its consistency. Leprechaun has Empower and allows you to just mana accumulate. It's also a little bit of free gold, but you'll mostly do it for the Explode on turn 1. And Mirage Queen is a legendary, however, it is a faction legendary, so if you throw a couple hundred shards at Sunken Fleet, you're probably going to be picking this up, definitely within 1,000 shards or so, unless you get really unlucky. And you do have to fully trait this, however, this gives half mana start to all elemental troops, and this is used entirely to get Rowain from a 12 mana start to a 6 mana start, or only means 6 to get the full. Alternatively, you can just go a second Leprechaun, of course, if you don't have Mirage Queen, so there are alternatives, but normally, if you have access to Mirage Queen, you generally want to be using it instead, though it is definitely not required, especially if you have to cast Rowain twice. If you're at the point where you need Urskia Shield and Rowain, you could even get away with going Leprechaun a little bit better than the half mana start, but when you only need one cast, is a little bit better to have the half mana start to kind of get things going. So as far as Illithia, you can literally just run the Illithia faction, the purple blue one, and there are two ways to run it. You can double up on Hive Mind or double up on Illithian Servitor. I would honestly go with the double damage instead of the double Hive Mind. It is slightly safer to go double Hive Mind, however, it's a lot more convenient just to go double Illithian, so I'd probably just stick with that. Main premise of this is to, they steal magic. So essentially what you want to do is steal magic from the enemy before they steal magic from you. You do have to be careful with what some of the hallway fights are prior to getting to the beginning battle all the way to the end battle, because while this team does work really good against the faction team itself, there are some teams that don't get penalized by magic who might be able to just absolutely decimate this team. So you do want to be a little bit careful with what you have, and occasionally might not be able to get it, not necessarily because the final battle is hard, but because the battles leading up to the final battles are actually going to be what gets you before you end up getting there. But this ends up stealing, they all have a way to basically steal magic, well, except for the one that's going to be killing. But essentially, this thing ends up stealing a bunch of magic from an enemy, which is based on your magic, and it shifts it to both life and armor. This one you generally don't want to cast unless you absolutely have to. The main one that you want to be spamming until the enemy is completely disabled is the Hive Mind. It steals a bunch of magic from an enemy and then shifts it into a random skill on all allies. A random skill can be magic. So basically, the most ideal thing that can happen, RNG based, is you go and steal from them, you steal magic, and then you have enough to basically steal their entire magic and just go absolutely crazy. Though alternatively, you just keep spamming this one, try to get their magic down, ideally just get good stats that keep you alive and or getting rid of their magic or getting you attack, and then you just start killing them. You'll want to just basically magic steal whatever the most threatening magic cast is on the opposing team, bulk up off of all this, and then go kill them off Illithian Servitors. If this thing ends up getting a magic buff, it is just going to be gaining pretty much double damage onto how much damage it ends up doing, and your main win condition is just keep spamming Illithian Servitor until they are dead by doing full AoE damage. They do have a little bit of spell reduction, however, if you just go and magic reduce them like crazy, the hardest battle is the battles before you get to the final. So the final itself is generally not too bad. You just throw like 2 magic reductions on them and you're pretty much good to go. Illithian Colossus, you want to hold its ability for as long as possible. Despite it being in first slot, you don't actually want to be casting it constantly. Main reason for this is just to make sure you're not blocking Illithian Servitors on blue, and it also allows you to burst magic reduce whatever is about to actually cast, because you mostly want to be spamming the Hive Mind, but keep this for, let's say they're about to cast something, and you've been saving this the entire time, you'd go throw this right before they end up doing their cast in order to reduce whatever their magic ratio ability is. Any middle battles that don't get magic reduced too well are going to be a struggle, but the first and final should be pretty much a cakewalk, and honestly one of the easier pure factions because of it. I believe it's also a 3-room setup, so you only have to do like one in-between room before you get to the actual boss itself. As far as the Slayer hero class, definitely a pretty good hero class. Of course, this isn't being used with Slayer hero class like most of the class events. Your goal is just to kill it as quickly as possible, and the easiest way to do that is just Black Manacles with Archmagus and just have Gem Hammer spam like crazy. Main gimmick with her is she does extra damage to, what was it, monsters? She does triple. However, that's not the reason you're using it. The reason you're using it is because she has power into a poke. So this basically allows you to Black Manacle and then clean up everything else, essentially. One of them you might have to clean with a Skull, otherwise Gem Hammer clears the other 3. So overall, not too bad. Use Black Manacle, Gem Hammer 3 times, take a Skull, and in most situations that will kill out the entire enemy team. Sometimes you might have to double Black Manacle and then do the Gem Hammers and Skull, but more often not, a single Black Manacle into triple Gem Hammer should be enough, and 1 Skull to kill them out. And of course, this weekend we have some monster invasions. As far as most invasions, the strategy for it is pretty straightforward, similar to how Raids has a similar strategy every single time. If the case for invasions is you go put 2 invasion troops in your first 2 slots, and then put a bunch of mana accumulation behind it. This one's a little bit different. We actually put in Power Skull Spammer behind it, though you can go any mana accumulating weapon. I personally am going Mirror here. However, you can use literally any of the mana accumulation weapons that you want, and you're going to be perfectly fine. Again, the green-blue ones, or whatever you feel like putting there. Though Essence of Evil isn't as good because they do have immune to everything. But any of the other ones that you want to put there, going to be perfectly fine. But the main premise with this is he goes and does 5 times damage to towers. He does it off of his other things, assuming you have it all the way upgraded to Mythic. He has a little bit of skull reduction, ends up becoming enraged when an enemy dies. You have 2 of them, so even if one of them dies, you still have the other one as backup. If it's one-shotting everything, it's just instantly regaining its enrage, and it's just going to decimate absolutely everything. Should be a very straightforward invasion event. It's actually, oddly enough, one of the better invasion troops in the game. So overall, should be pretty much a cakewalk. You could literally, once you reach 4 battles, probably just win with a single Sharp Tooth. Though obviously you want to have more team than that. And Apotheosis here is just for, or Apophysis I mean, is just here for the convert green to skulls. This is just for some burst skulls. Since obviously you have a lot of damage, you want even more damage, so it goes even quicker. Also give some life to your first ally just to make sure it doesn't die. You can pretty much give it like 1 or 2 extra skull hits, or pokes before it ends up dying, which is convenient and can help out a little bit. Reflection of Good can also do that by giving barrier and every positive status effect in the game. For once they finally drop, just do it on your first slot and it's gonna be good to go. Also redoes the enrage if it somehow dropped its enrage. Though generally, once it gets enraged, it's gonna be keeping the whole time because it's gonna be one-shotting everything. It'll be doing that for quite a while, unless you bought a really high tier and you're going for leaderboard. I'm pretty sure its enrage is gonna be enough to one-shot the entire amount of time. If you buy just like a tier 3 or so, and you just play the daily battles, I'm pretty sure he has enough damage to never stop one-shotting the towers, so that's pretty convenient. Only if you're really going for a higher tier would it stop, and even then it's going to be fine. You have enough damage that's not going to matter. But anyways, guys, that will wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I'll make sure to get around to them. As I mentioned earlier, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be streaming here on the channel as we do every single night at that time. And we will specifically be going over all of the Chapter 3 tasks, as well as the new weapon, which will probably be the more interesting thing. Should be, I'm kind of curious to see how the weapon goes down. Of course, some people probably already had some time to mess around with it already, but I haven't yet. But I don't know, it seems pretty good. Probably gonna be a top 20 weapon, so that's a pretty nice contender for that. It's not gonna be like the new rope dart, but it does seem like it has some pretty good potential, especially with board clear, and especially with the fact that we still have a potion event going on right now for the next 7 weeks as the duration of the campaign. Feels so much better than Lycanthropy 2. I felt like this season that Lycanthropy dragged on forever. Yeah, these seasons just like flying by because potion gems are actually amazing. I really like them, at least compared to Lycanthropy. We'll see how the next power gem is next season and compare it to the 2 of them, since comparing it to Lycanthropy, almost everything will seem better. But anyways, guys, I'll catch you guys later. Thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget Guild Wars is every other week as well. I mean, every other day this week, I mean. So definitely don't forget to take those, as you generally want to be doing those dailies to help out your guild. I'll catch you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye, everyone.